Welcome back to the Purposeful Wisdom Podcast, you guys. My name is Dawn Christine. Thank you so much for being with me today. For those of you joining for the first time, welcome in. For those of you coming back, thank you for being here. I have a very special guest on the podcast today. His name is Avrum Weiss, and Avrum is going to help us with the topic of understanding men and women better. So I really am happy that he's here today. Avrum is a distinguished authority on the intricacies of male-female dynamics and the art of fostering deeper understanding between the sexes. Avrum Weiss is an accomplished author with 4 impactful books to his name, each delving into the depths of human relationships and psychology. With a wealth of knowledge and experience, he has graced over 100 stages and interviews, captivating audiences with his insightful perspectives on men's fears of women and the ways in which both genders can bridge the gap in understanding. Avrum's contributions extend beyond the spoken word, as he is a regular and esteemed contributor to Psychology Today, where his thought-provoking articles have garnered a remarkable readership of over 1.5 million views. So I am super, super excited. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. I actually didn't send you the updated bio. Apparently, it's 2.25 million views now.
Ooh, okay. Look at you. I love that. I hope to be that one day too as well. That's a very big inspiration. You've definitely inspired me with that.
The crazy world we live in.
Oh my gosh. But you know what? We're all here to help and contribute and serve. And we're both on missions to do that. So thank you so much for being part of this
My
today.
pleasure.
I really do appreciate it.
Looking forward to it.
So I'd love to just dive in here because, men and women, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We always have this concept. And at the end of the day, I think both genders really want to try to understand the opposite sex. And because we think differently, we have different emotions that we embrace, it's really complex. So how can men and women better understand each other? What is the first step to all of this?
I think the first step would be a little humility, which is that I think men and women often get in trouble because they act as if men act as if women think like men, and women act as if men think like women.
It's so true.
Men are surprised that women don't think like men, and women are surprised that. So I think the first step is to stop assuming that you think the same way.
That's really true, because we're always trying to get into the heads of men, and men are always trying to get into the heads of women.
Right. So
you're saying as long as we stay in our lane, as far as, and of course, respectively saying, like, just stop trying to think like a man.
Well, it's not so much trying to stop, like, it's more that if you notice, if you have a really good argument with a man or a woman, you'll notice at some point, let's say you're part, if you're heterosexual and you're having a really good argument, at some point during the argument, it's like the light bulb goes off and you go, oh, that's what you were thinking? Then you know you're in a really good argument, because you realize that you have not been getting it, that you've been assuming you know what the other person is thinking. And you know it's a good fight when you realize that you have no idea what they've been thinking, and you're starting to learn something. They're actually getting through to you, and you're starting to get it. That's a good fight.
I understand that. And I think too, would you say that it's almost that we try to make this story up in our head, so to speak, of what we assume they're going to be like, or assume they're going to answer. So we're like spinning our wheels here.
And we assume that they're thinking like us.
Right.
Not.
So how could men and women effectively communicate in a relationship from the beginning here? Because, at first there's, the love phase, or what they call the honeymoon phase. Everyone's on their best behavior and trying to please the other partner and impress them. And then, at the end of the day, when things settle down, true colors come out. And now there's that, oh, wait a minute, I see this, or I see this. And now you're trying to figure each other out, because the whole honeymoon phase is over, the facade is over, and now true colors are coming out. So what would you say to that? How can we better understand each other and ask the right questions even?
It's very simple. It's I do a lot of training of therapists, and I always say to therapists, when in doubt, when you don't know what to do, when you're really confused, shut up and listen. And the same advice applies to relationships. If you're really confused and you're really upset, and you don't understand what the hell's going on, shut up and listen. It's hard to go wrong listening. Most of the trouble that you're going to get in a relationship is from talking too much and not listening enough. It's hard to get in trouble by really listening.
I like that. I like that a lot. What would you say if it's not equal on that? So in other words, if you're trying to get your point across about something that you're concerned with within a relationship, and the other person isn't listening or isn't responding, and you feel like you've been on this hamster wheel of saying the same thing over and over, and you're not getting any response from the opposite person, what would you say to that? How would you even handle something like
I
that?
would say, I don't think you're listening to me.
What would be the next step for that though? Like, in
Depending
other
on
words,
whether or not they start listening. If they say, if they just keep continuing talking, they don't listen, then I think the conversation is over, because conversation is a two-part equation. It requires both people to listen. And if you point out to somebody that they're not listening to you and they continue to not listen, there's no reason to continue in the conversation.
and that should be a big red flag for most people to say, okay, obviously this is not equal. Something needs to happen. Either I need to get out of this relationship or this is the way it is.
Yeah, I think listening is, I wrote an article, I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it's something about like 5 stages of listening. It's on psychologytoday.com. And people think listening, a lot of times people will say to somebody, you're not listening to me. And they say, yes, I am. You just said I'm not listening to you. Because they think listening is the same as being a tape recorder, like repeating back to the person the words they just said. But it's way more complicated than that. Because listening is not just being able to repeat the words back. Listening includes hearing between the lines. Listening includes paying attention to what you're feeling when the other person is talking. There are all kinds of nuances involved in listening. In fact, people very rarely just listen. So some of the things that we might suggest to people when they're trying to have a conversation. So for example, I remember a couple I worked with, and they're talking about what difficulty they have with communication. And they mentioned that they try to talk to each other during dinner with the television on. And I'm like, what? I said, well, why don't you turn the television off? And we went at this for weeks, and they never once were successful in turning the television off when they talked to each other. So, there are some basics, like don't have your phones on, don't have the television on, just some basics like just do one thing at a time, just talk, don't have other things going on while you're trying to talk with each other. But it's not an easy thing to do at all, to have an in-depth personal conversation with someone. It's hard.
It is, because I think in the same breath, there's also emotion coming out. And when you're
Absolutely.
saying read between the lines, that's where I go. If a person is literally going deep within their soul, in the depths of their soul, and trying to make the other person understand what they're going through, what they're feeling, or how a situation makes them feel, and they're just hearing words, they're not paying attention to the body language of the other person, the tone of the person, if if they're crying, if they're laughing. I think it's a pretty package, and you're right, a lot of people just don't really look at the whole picture to really understand what the other person is trying to communicate.
Absolutely. That's it. We say they hear the words but not the music.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. I was looking at some of the things that you've talked about, and there's so many things that are targeted towards the male in this sense of why a lot of men are just emotionally withdrawn overall. Can you explain on that topic?
Well, my book is called Hidden in Plain Sight, How Men's Fears of Women Shape Their Intimate Relationships. And so I've been talking and writing about the idea that men are afraid of women. And it's a two-part equation. So men are afraid of women, but women often tend to be somewhat aggressive with men. And the book I'm working on now is how women are taught by their mothers to be critical and condescending towards men. And so you have a whole feedback loop going on where women are not aware of the ways in which they're critical and condescending towards men, but men feel it. And so they're defensive and withdraw because if you sit in a group of men with no women around and you listen to their private conversation, they talk about feeling criticized by women. And they say things like, I can't get it right with her. No matter what I do, it's never enough. She keeps moving the goalposts. I can't please her. And so for them, it's sort of like a never-ending struggle to please her. But the women are not aware of the fact that for them, they complain about the men are always withdrawing, that they can't get the men to connect. They can't get the men to want to engage. And so you see, it's like a dog chasing its tail. They're going round and round and round, and neither one of them understands and they can't connect. And neither one of them is pleased with how it's going, but they don't understand. They're each blaming the other and not understanding how the two parts interact with each other. And it's sad, because I think they both want the same thing and they're blaming each other and not understanding how the two parts go together.
No, that's really interesting because obviously, my brain's going a mile a minute here, listening to everything. And so in a way, it is generational because your mother role, whether it's male or female, that plays a role on it of how she was raised, passes it on to you. And then you develop those traits and those expectations, which is probably wrong to begin with. And there is never a commonality because the man is always trying to win the woman over, so to speak, and feel like he's just in this vicious cycle of pleasing her. And then the woman is constantly moving the bar because that's how her mother raised her.
Yeah. What's shocking to women, what they really don't understand about men, is that what men are trying to do is avoid being abandoned. It's not just they're trying to please women. It's that they're really terrified that you're going to leave them.
Why is that?
Because when we were little babies and our mommies got distracted and went to turn the dinner off, you left us. And we were all by ourselves for a moment and we didn't know what the hell to do. And there was just you. If you're interested in this, go Google the still face experiment, STILL face experiment. And there are these experiments where they instruct the moms and the babies are playing, and they instruct the moms to just turn away for a minute and then come back with a still face, an unexpressive face. And within a minute, the babies are so upset, they fall apart, they collapse. They're so distraught. Some of them lost bowel control, right? Wow. So we're completely dependent on our mothers to reassure us that we are okay, that they love us, that they're paying attention to us. So if you're a boy, that person is a woman.
Right.
And guess what? When you grow up to be a big boy, if you're heterosexual, who do you fall in love with? Who do you rely on? Who are you watching to make sure she loves you and you're okay? It's a woman. And it recreates the same dynamics for you within a woman as an adult as you had as a little baby, as a boy. And so you watch her carefully. So when you're a little baby, you say, if mom ain't happy, nobody's happy. And you grow up to be a man and you say, what? Happy wife, happy life.
Happy life, right?
Same dynamic gets recreated, and adult men monitor their partners for any sign of dissatisfaction to a degree that would shock you. I had a guy tell me once that he could tell if his wife was unhappy with him the moment he walked in the door, which doesn't seem all that surprising, except he meant before he saw her, that he meant as soon as he walked in the door, he could feel it in the air before he saw it.
Pretty intuitive. I mean, we are all energy and we all give off a certain kind of vibe. So that makes sense to me.
And to him, he felt that his emotional well-being was entirely dependent on whether or not his wife was currently okay with him.
Wow. That's really
That was going
interesting.
on all the time.
So women have another sort of attachment to their mothers. They see them as the role model. And then obviously this, we're learning wrong as far as the expectations, raising the bar. But men have a different emotional attachment to their mothers in this way. Do you feel that all men are like this?
I couldn't say all, but I would say, I'll just say I have yet to meet a straight man that doesn't have this going on.
Wow, that's really interesting.
And I've worked with, hundreds and hundreds of straight men, and I've yet to meet a straight man who said, nah, that's not me.
Now, why do you think that, how does that tie into the men that are emotionally unavailable though? So if they're so worried or concerned about being abandoned by their partners, why aren't they being more expressive in how they feel towards the woman so that they can both come together and resolve something?
It's a preemptive strike. It's a protective mechanism. It's a way of protecting themselves from needing you. I don't need you. I'll just take.
So it's the ego.
Home. I'll build a man cave, and so I'll just pretend I don't need you, so that it's not so threatening.
So ego definitely contributes to it instead of being open with how they're feeling and avoiding that altogether, because essentially they're self-sabotaging it.
I don't think it's ego. I think it's way deeper than ego. I think it's way more primitive than ego. I think it's protecting themselves at the deepest levels.
So it's like this play on words, almost like, I don't want you to abandon me, yet, well, whatever. If I have to protect my true feelings, then if I'm going to be abandoned, I'm going to be. So it's like counterintuitive. It's like they're self-sabotaging their own relationship in a way.
I think they're taking care of themselves so that they can't be hurt. They're isolating themselves so that you can't leave them. They're protecting themselves so that they can't be left.
That's a very interesting way, because I feel so many people I've talked to, I mean, friends of dear friends, even some of my own relationships in the past, the men that I've known in my life are emotionally unavailable. And when I've tried in the past to say, open up, talk to me about these things, let's figure it out. Like, they shut down and have this essential behavior of what you're exactly saying, like, I don't need you, whatever. But yet in the back of their minds, what you're saying is that they're afraid to be abandoned.
Well, here's an interesting piece of information for you. I've been running psychotherapy groups for men for about a dozen years. And I thought, the night before I started my first group for men, I thought, this is the stupidest idea I've ever had in my life. They're going to sit there. They're not going to talk about anything. They're going to talk sports. They're going to talk work. They're going to talk, I'll have to pull teeth. Nobody's going to open up at all. And I'll tell you, I've been running psychotherapy groups for 50 years. The groups I run with men are the most emotionally open groups I have ever run in my life. They're the only groups where people talk openly about loving each other. They are unbelievably emotionally open. And what you just described is not a description of men. It's a description of men talking to women. Men talking to men are very different than men talking to women. You would not
Wow.
recognize men talking to other men.
And why do you think that is? Do you feel that
They're
because of
scared
the,
of you.
that's what I was just gonna ask, like because we come off so aggressive, and that's the way we were taught by our mothers
Yes.
for the most part,
Yes.
they're afraid to open up. So what can women do to seem less aggressive and come off in a way where men will open up to their partners?
The first and most important thing you can do is understand that men are scared, which is not clear because men are socialized to hide their fears, thus the name of the book, Hidden in Plain Sight. So
Right.
once women start understanding that men are scared, that alone changes everything. Because once women understand that, then they sort of slow down and are less intimidating, and men then start becoming, because of course men want to talk to you, and once
Right.
you understand, actually, let me grab something because it's a
Yes,
great quote.
please.
This is a quote from a woman in a workshop I did. This was a workshop for men and women about this topic, and she said,
Okay.
I understand that my husband has not been ignoring, dismissing, or hurting me out of a lack of respect, as I suspected, but that he's scared, scared to hurt me, scared to mess up with me, scared to not be enough. I bet you never considered that possibility. I had honestly never imagined he was scared and that I was so profoundly important to him that he was constantly terrified I would leave him. So once she understood that he was scared that she would leave him, it changed everything in their marriage, just her understanding that profoundly.
Wow.
And what was interesting in this workshop, it was men and women together. We met for 3 days, and then there was a 4-month break, and then we met again for 3 days. The women were the ones who made the most changes in their relationships, more than the men.
Wow.
It was,
Just by changing their demeanor. And I'm sure tone has a lot to do with it. And I'm sure that at the end of the day, too, just the approach. So, I mean, a man's gonna feel threatened if you're coming at them, where you could say, you know what, it looks like you had a bad day today. I'm here if you need to talk. And just maybe something as simple as that,
yes,
where you're not coming off so aggressive, like, I know something's wrong, talk to me, blah,
yeah,
blah. That's gonna
yeah,
cause them to shut down.
absolutely. Or would you like to talk? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And just
One of the things
listen.
I can't take credit for, it wasn't my idea, but several couples have told me, and I think it's absolutely genius, is they're reading the book together and they're doing it in this way. They read chapter 1 and then they talk about chapter 1. They don't go on to chapter 2 until they've talked about chapter 1. Then they read chapter 2 and they don't go on to and I think it's just great because they're each getting so much out of it. They read the chapter and the guys go, yeah, that's me. That's what I've been trying to tell you. And the women are like, oh my God, I didn't understand that. So it's just a great sort of conversation starter. And I just think that's a great way to do it. Plus, you can just buy 1 copy, see, and you should share them. Save
No,
money
I'll
too.
buy 2, just in case you're traveling. You guys can read the chapter together and discuss it over a call.
Yeah.
Why not? What do you feel like? What is, besides a woman abandoning their partner, what is the second most thing men fear?
I think that's the top one. And I think probably the next in terms of intensity is men are really frightened about being let me give you 2. Men are really afraid of women being emotional, and which is not a surprise to you. But what might surprise you is that what men are afraid about is not you being emotional. It's not that they're afraid of you being emotional. It's that they're afraid of their own feelings that get stirred up when you are emotional. So men often try to control you and try to get you to be less emotional. But what they're really trying to do is to calm their own feelings, because emotions are as contagious as yawns.
Oh, yeah.
So when you get anxious and men are trying to fix you and help you be less anxious, it's their own anxiety they're trying to solve, not yours. They could not that really interested in whether or not you're anxious. It's more their own anxiety that they're trying to. And the other interesting one is that men, there's a lot of cultural stuff about women trying to control men. And so there's a lot of social pressure on men to not be controlled by women. And, a lot of that comes out in all the stereotypes about women trying to get men to marry them,
Right.
which is hilarious because you would think that we make it out to be like marriage is something that works really well for women, and that women try to trap men into getting married, and that marriage is terrible for men, and men try to hold out and not get married for as long as they can. But the research overwhelmingly says that single women are happier, healthier, and wealthier than married women. And married men are happier, healthier, and wealthier. So it's all crap. It's all
right. It is.
It's complete nonsense.
I agree with that. I agree with that too, because I mean, again, you could stereotype both genders, and there will be that bunch of people that go against that. I mean, I've been so independent. Like, I love my single life now, was married for several years. And there's just a sense of freedom for me, of independence and just doing my own thing and whatnot. So definitely, I think everybody's own situation is different from each other, so to speak.
Yep.
What would you say as far as when you're first coming into a relationship, and now that you are educating my women viewers on this channel of, okay, we need to take a step back too and just kind of understand where the men are coming from, and that this is deep down how they're feeling. How can you both be on the same playing field when it comes to emotions? Because if we're triggering, because we are emotional creatures, women just are. And if it's too much for the man to handle, and I've often been told, even in some of my relationships, like I was too much, I was too emotional. Where's the common medium? Because we want to be able to fully express who we are as individuals and not be something we're not. So where's the happy medium if we're triggering our partner?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's a bit of a what's the right expression? It's something I have a lot of feelings about. There's no evidence at all that women are more emotional than men. It's really not true. I've been in a bit of a conflict recently. A colleague of mine wrote a book, and she said, basically, it's a book for women therapists who want to work with men. And there's a chapter in there where she says to women therapists, men are not really very good with feelings. So you should probably do like more problem solving and cognitive approaches to therapy with them, since they're not very comfortable with emotions. And I was just about blew my top. I said, imagine if you wrote that chapter about working with African-American patients, and you said, well, they're not very good about feelings, so you should kind of dumb it down for them. I said, you would be just attacked by I mean, it's so insulting about men to say that you have to dumb it down because they're not very good about feelings. So men are less comfortable emotionally, not because there's anything inherently different about them, but because they've been socialized since they were little boys to not be comfortable with their feelings. There's nothing different about us that makes us not as good about emotions. And if you sat in on one of my men's therapy groups, you would see emotionally fluent men talking about their feelings. So in relations between men and women, it's just men learning how to get up to speed with their female partners. And in a good, healthy heterosexual relationship, men see that as an opportunity to learn to get up to speed and to learn from somebody who's had more experience, just like the woman might see things they can learn from their male partner about self-confidence or other things that maybe the man has been socialized to learn. In any relationship, people learn from each other the things that the other person has had more opportunities to learn.
And why do you think from when these men were boys, young kids, that they've been taught to not express? Do you think it's more a cultural belief
Yes,
or a generational belief? Like, oh, you have
cultural.
to be strong, you can't show emotion, you
Yes,
can't. So that they're self-sabotaging their kids from when they're
yes,
young to not grow up and become
yes.
socially and emotionally available men
Yes, we
in a
have
way.
research from kids as young as 4 months old of them being socialized to not express their feelings. There's a very, very good and very disturbing book called When Boys Become Boys. The author is Judy Chu, and she spent 2 years sitting in a pre-K kindergarten class watching the process happen, studying how these boys become socialized. She tells the story about these kids. It's such a painful story. The end of the year, each kid is invited to pick their favorite song to lead the class in. And this sweet little boy gets up in front of the class and he starts singing a lullaby. And immediately all the boys in the class start making fun of him. And this little boy, this is a 4-year-old boy, immediately says, "Oh, no, I was just kidding." And it switches and starts singing the Marine Corps anthem. 4-year-old boy already understands that if he sounds feminine in any way, he will be mocked and humiliated by other boys. And so he toughens up right then and there. It's happening in a 4-year-old boy. So yeah,
So
the
sad.
evidence is overwhelming. There is so little about masculine and feminine that is innate. It is overwhelmingly learned.
Yeah, and it
And
makes sense.
what's
It
sad
does.
is that this was a Quaker school. The school was doing everything they could to not gender socialize these kids. The parents were terminally liberal, doing everything they could to not, and it still happened. It didn't
Right.
matter. The school, the parents, they were all trying to avoid it. But the kids go home and watch whatever the crap they watch, and they live in the world, and everybody's trying to avoid it, and it still happens.
So sad too. It's so sad that and I could see it. I could see that it's the root of the cause with both genders.
My
You know, we're taught as young girls to, do our thing through
yep,
our mothers and their mother and generational. And then these boys were growing up thinking not to show emotion, toughen up.
yep,
And we take those traits into our adulthood and now we're meeting and then we're expected to
yep,
understand each other.
absolutely.
So I think I could, from at least from what I'm hearing, it really does need to start at the root when children are in their younger years
Yes,
to explain emotions and explain that it's okay, that emotion is not a gender specific at
no,
all. It's just what you are, what you feel, and you should embrace what you feel, how you feel, and no one should take that away from you, so to speak.
it's hard because you can do that with your kids, but then they're out, they go to school, they go to Boy
Course.
Scouts, they go to soccer, they get, they're out in the world too. So it's tough.
Right. It is. It is. I mean, I'm personally teaching both my kids to embrace their emotions. I'm very involved in their emotional, not only physical, but emotional and mental well-being, because I know I didn't have that when
Yeah,
I was a young child. So I'm trying to do everything opposite with my kids. Like, what are you feeling today?
right,
I ask them, not how, what are you feeling today? I
right.
want to know, and it's asking the right questions as a parent to get them using the right words, even emotions. I give them emotion wheels. Like, I'm
Yeah,
not afraid to say that. Like, what are you
yeah,
feeling on the wheel today?
yeah,
Go deeper into your emotions. And, I think it does start with the school systems too. I feel like all the schools should have some sort, properly training the teachers or whatever that looks like to talk about emotions and feelings, and where everyone can come together and feel heard and validated. Because if we're so busy making fun of how someone's feeling, we're not validating their truth.
absolutely. And then, when we're doing all that work, which is great, what happens on the playground
Of
when we're
course.
not there?
And that's where the resilience, unfortunately, has to come in, because we don't live in a perfect world. So, building up that backbone too, and teaching them to be resilient, and that, what, respectfully, everyone has an opinion. I tell my kids all the time, opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one, but it doesn't, but it doesn't
Right.
matter. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, but it's what you feel about you.
Right.
That's what's important, going within and knowing who you are as a person. And oh, well, let them think what they want, but we're all culturally taught to, oh, what is someone going to think if I do this? Or what if I show up and like, we're always in our heads about it.
Remember when you were a kid, you remember how important it was to you what other kids thought about you, and how bad it felt when you were different than other kids. And it's not easy.
I get it. I get it. Even as a young child, trying to fit in and knowing I didn't, and all this. And now I'm to the point, I'm like, I am who I am. Like, I think you just grow out of it, hopefully. At least that's what I've learned. Like, hopefully you do.
Some people do.
Yeah, like, whatever. Who cares what people think? Like, and I mean that in a loving, respectful way. Like, I know I'm not for everybody, but I'm comfortable who I am in my skin. So what could we do as caregivers, maybe starting at the root? What would you say? How can we embrace this to our children, even where we give them a better chance of being in tune with their emotions and how they're feeling?
Well, I think you used a really important word a little while ago. So I'm going to give you a sort of generation specific answer. I think in this current climate, the one thing we are not providing nearly enough for our kids is resilience. We've become so overprotective of our kids that what's lacking for this generation are opportunities to really struggle. And I'm going to give a surprisingly traditional answer, which is sports. I mean, one of the things, I remember the moment when my son played a lot of soccer. And I remember the moment, I don't know how old it was, like 8 or something. And they played a game. It was a monsoon. The mud was like this thick on the field. And I remember thinking, like, wow, this is really a character building, because a lot of the kids just were like, they just quit trying. And some of the kids just like reached down deep inside of themselves and fought through it. And that's what I think we need to be back off, quit being so overprotective, and let kids make more mistakes, struggle more, and play in the damn mud, and find out that they can. And I'm a big fan of Outward Bound and experiences like that, where you take them out there and you put them in experiences that are really hard, and they have to figure out how to get through challenging situations. And sports, Outward Bound, where you find out, I didn't think I could do this, but I did it. And isn't that great? Where they figure out that they're resourceful, that they can do things that they didn't know they could do. They didn't need their parents to protect them, and they got through it.
That's right. I mean, that didn't happen in my generation.
Yeah.
I had to figure everything out for myself. And yes, there is, yes, as good parents, as caregivers, we want to protect our children from the threats of the world, the dangers.
Things that are really threatening. Yeah.
Right, of course. But at the end of the day, no matter where you go, you're going to run into people that are just creeps. Let's just face it. No matter if you're in school, if you're in the workplace, you're going to be around these people that you may not get along with. And you have to tether that storm, and you have to learn how to navigate the rough waters, so to speak. And, not everybody is for you. Not everybody is meant to be your friends. You're going to have the bullies of the world in all situations. And navigating through that, I think, is very important for character building and self-esteem. And, but I think it also starts with knowing who they are at the same time. So you have like two ends of the spectrum. You have the very, very protective parents. Let them, whatever it is, like, it's their thing, no judgment here. And then you have the parents that are like, do whatever you want. And there's no happy medium, I feel.
No.
I think that's where the issue is. There's no happy medium for these kids. They either are abandoned or so smothered that they don't have room to breathe in either situation.
When I was a kid, there was a place up the hill that was 100 acres of woods. And for fun, we used to go up and we would try to get lost.
Love that.
We would just pick a direction, and there was just a limit to how lost you could get.
Right.
But we would just pick a direction in the woods, and it was a great experience, because it was enough that you could get lost and not know where you were, and then you'd have to find your way out. And so it was enough to get scared,
Yeah,
but not die. You weren't going to die in a neighborhood woods, but enough to get a little scared. And I don't think kids get scared much now. I think that somebody's always sort of, it's like kids, most of their play now is supervised, and none of my play as a kid was supervised.
Right. Well,
So-
it's either that or they're on their electronics. I mean, look
Yeah.
at we are in a digital world today, so they're either watching YouTube or on a device or on the computer, or so they're not even stepping out into the real world. They're
Yeah.
in the digital world too. So that dynamic's changed. It reminded me when you were saying we used to go up into the woods. It reminded me of that quote: "Not all who wander are lost," because it's the same kind of thing. We go off the beaten path sometimes and we think we're lost, and we're really not. We're just taking a different path.
That's my daughter has that tattooed.
I love that. I love that saying. I love that saying. No, I really appreciate all this beautiful expertise you had today, because it is true. I think, the more and more we actually take time out to really understand that at the end of the day, both genders don't really know what's going on anymore. And if we took the time to listen and sit and really make time for each other in a relationship and sit down and listen to each other and really take in everything and come to a general understanding of how can I support you where we don't come off threatened, and then having the man open up to the woman where they don't feel so, threatened in a way, or just, we both have work to do. Both genders have work to do on this, I feel.
But the benefits are overwhelming, because when you listen, people sometimes say to me, don't you get bored listening to people? And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's the most interesting job in the world. What could be more interesting than people? Because when you really listen to someone, it's the most fascinating thing in the world. And so when you're in an intimate relationship and you really get to know somebody, it's incredibly interesting. And so if you're really listening to another human being, it's like international travel. It's like there's so much to learn.
And every person is like an onion. We all have layers.
Absolutely.
And it's how far down the how many layers are you willing to open and really learn? Because
Endlessly.
I know people that have been married 40 plus years. And that's rare in its own nowadays, to be perfectly honest. And I look up to those people. I admire that so much. I wish relationships were as strong as they were back then. But it's like, they tell me all the time, I learn something new every day about her. And I've been married to her 42 years. And I'm like, but that's the way it should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the way we shouldn't, we're on this plane to learn and continue to learn. So if you're not learning something new about your partner every day, then something's wrong. Then you're not listening enough, I feel.
Hopefully they're also changing too. Hopefully it's not the same person every day.
Right. I think that's another thing, and I think we'll end with that too. That's really interesting that you brought that up. I think on both sides, people expect that you're the same person that you are when you get into the relationship, and you're going to just continue to be that person. And I've always said that when you come into a relationship, you're not supposed to complete each other. You're supposed to complement each other. And if you're not growing as individuals in the relationship, so that your individual growth will add growth to the combined relationship, then something's wrong. Something's wrong in that dynamic. We're supposed to change and grow and evolve.
Yep.
And I think people just have this expectation of, this is the person I met and this is the person they're going to be forever. That's a big red flag.
Yeah, that's called death, is what that's called.
Yes.
Yeah. Couple of things before we end. One is my website is avrumweissphd.com. If you sign up for the mailing list there, you'll get a free ebook about relationships, and you'll get copies of future articles.
Beautiful.
There's also a place there for women if you're interested in being interviewed for the research about what mothers teach their daughters about men. I will get in touch with you and schedule a time to interview you.
Lovely. And I always put all the contact information
Right.
in the description box for everyone to reach out. I cannot thank you enough for your
You're very
time
welcome.
today.
I
This
enjoyed
has been
talking with you.
so beautiful. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, spread the message. Let's help heal the world. And I will see you on the next episode. Take care, guys. Bye.